Welcome to the Finjan Show. I'm your host, Faris Alami. And today, one of the questions I've been asked before is how do you deal with failure as an entrepreneur? Well, let's get started. Not much time to waste because unfortunately, we all have to face it. Now, we could take failure in different ways. And some people say transition. I mentioned this in some of my other podcasts where I transition from one business to another, whether it's burnout or failure, it doesn't really matter, but you moved on from it. But sometimes you face it and you get hurt so much that you never get to A, face it, or B, acknowledge it, or C, overcome it. And what I think is important with entrepreneurship failure, that recognizing that there's a difference between the person and the business. And the way you do that is you as a person might have not failed, the business might have failed. And why would the business fail? Well, we all know that there are three factors in business, right? Money, management, or market. That's really it. You could change it any way you want. You could look at it any way you want, but it's really either the management is not working, the market is not working, or the money is not working. And I don't really care which way you take it. Sure, at the end of the day, the bucket stops with the entrepreneur who started the business for sure. But also sometimes you can't overcome some of these challenges. Maybe you're ahead of your time. Maybe you launch technology that is maybe not there to accept, or the market is not there to accept it. Or the money just wasn't there to keep you going because you might have needed 2 years run and you only had 6 months run of cash. Or your management team just didn't have the capacity to take on the tasks that you were creating for them. Either way, it's just not working. And you could either choose to keep going, which sometimes people do, and then they fail really hard, and then it's hard for them to recover. And many actually, when they fail, they're able to, kind of like move away from it and be fine and just keep going. And this, I think, is somewhat tied into being burned out at one other point, but let's just keep focusing about the failing part of it. Have I personally failed in a business? I failed in so many businesses. And some of the times they were just bad timing for me. They were just not the right thing for me. And sometimes I didn't because I had no choice. I started, for instance, in a company that basically did image design for young entrepreneurs and professionals, mainly second generations of entrepreneurs in a business. And the reason I started because many of them just didn't know how to act or work in a professional environment, having grown up in a family of business, and now things may be changing or shifted. That business failed miserably just because there's so much work that needed to be done, and I was trying to do all of it, and it just didn't work, right? No, it didn't work, not because I didn't work. I was working 16-hour days, 7 days a week. But it just needed a lot more than that. It probably needed 3 more people in addition to me, one person looking for a strategy, one person creating these partnerships, one person potentially making the calls to get new customers, and one person managing the operation and the cash flow. That wasn't happening, so it failed. I could have easily sat there and said, oh, I'm a failure, I can't do anything. Or I could look back and say, I don't even have time to look at it. And at the time, I just moved to something else because I needed to make some cash. I'm sharing that example of me. I'm hoping that you could reflect on your own journey to think about what you could have done. I'm going to use some other examples of entrepreneurs I worked with where they failed and you were able to keep going, and where some failed and they were not able to keep going. And we'll talk about how you could learn from them as well for your own journey. Let's take a break. We'll be right back after these short messages. Welcome back, everyone, and thank you so much for tuning in. I'm your host, Faris Alami, and this is the Finjan Show. Today, we're discussing entrepreneurship failure. And one of the things we want to talk about right now is what are some of the examples of people who have failed and kept going, and some of the examples who they failed and they moved in a different direction. Well, whether you decide once you failed that you want to do something else, another entrepreneurship journey or another business or another idea, that's one way. Or you decide, I'm going to go work somewhere and become an employee. I want to mention something important. Your mindset doesn't really change. Your mindset as an entrepreneur looking at problems, looking for solutions, is probably still with you. The question is how you're going about it, whether it's your own money or someone else's money. And that's really what it might have changed in those facts. And I will bring this up to you because I don't want you to think because you failed your business or the business failed you, or the market failed you, or the money failed you, that you have to sit there and, be depressed about it or take it so personally. Because at the end of the day, sure, you are the person responsible. But remember, we talked about those three factors: money, market, and management. And one of them given, maybe it's your management, but maybe I hope you learn from it. So therefore, you could move forward. Because it's not about failing, as we all know, and it's not about making mistakes. It's about acknowledging them and then learning from them is what makes you move forward. So whether you decide once you fail your business, you could move on to another business. I have one example. One entrepreneur started a business, and when they started, they were just a little too early. And as they developed this technology, and this happens to be a technology entrepreneur, and they failed the technology just wasn't working, and they were taking forever to develop it. They just failed. All their funders pulled the money out of them and they stopped funding them. And they had to shut down because they had no more money to develop the business or develop the technology. He went and 3 months later came up with a whole nother idea, completely different technology. One was a robot for, a whole nother section or sectors like in your home. And the other one was in the health department, in the health area. So completely different, but it's the same concept of robots. So I want you to think about that you could evolve as you fail from one to move to another. And there's nothing wrong with it. Actually, it's healthy and it's good for you to be aware of it. The second one is a person who actually their partnerships was falling apart. They had 3 partners and 2 of them were gaining up on the third one, and they chose to opt out and move to do something else. And at the time, it was best suited for them to go get a job somewhere for a couple of years before they regroup and rethink and resave. It's a pathway. She had a restaurant in the city, and she wanted to, once that happens, she wanted to move to get a job. Not right, not wrong, just different. Think about when you fail a business, what do you want to do? I'll never forget the first time someone asked me, what would you do if you don't do well with this? And I remember just my face going like, what do you mean? This is the only thing I know. And looking back at that face, this was back in my t-shirts and perfume days. Looking back at that time, I'm thinking I probably didn't know any better, because just like a young aspiring entrepreneur, I was just doing what I needed to do to get to live. But reflecting back, that was a deeply great question that I never thought about, because I really just thought this is the only thing I'm going to do and that's it. But in reality, I've already have moved from one phase to another to something else. And then at that business, also I ended up shutting it down because of many challenges I mentioned before in so many podcasts. The point that I'm trying to bring up here is if you're aware of it, you could strategize and plan for it. If you're not aware of it, failure can take you off guard. So keep your guard up by learning about it and facing it and understanding what are your choices if you choose to go that route, and how to keep going and which directions you want to take. Till the next time, I appreciate you tuning in. I'm your host, Faris Alami, and this is the Finjan Show.